We have a refreshing episode this week on What's the Juice. I did not expect this conversation to even go as beautifully as it did. I knew that it was going to be a very interesting subject matter because we're talking about something that's so important for so many of us listening, which is how we over-associate our worth with our job titles and productivity and accomplishments, and how we got to really learn to pull that identity back and see ourselves as a human outside of what we do in this world. And it's wild, right? Like that is a very hard conversation and thing to grasp or put into action as it is. But we ended up going so deep in this talk, and I think it's something that so many people need to hear. It was very healing for me to have this convo with Madison Utendahl. She experienced extreme burnout in her corporate career and ended up starting her own creative agency. And she actually talks a lot about how creative girlies get very stuck in the corporate and the marketing world because they have all these gifts and they end up coming out through like capitalism when they could come out in other ways that I guess are still tied to capitalism, but just feel better for their souls and just end up being more aligned. So if you are someone who's like just struggling with feeling like you're a cog in the machine and you're not finding a lot of fulfillment outside of your work, or you're finding yourself like working as a coping mechanism or sitting there on your computer late at night checking emails even when you don't have to because it just feels more comfortable to do that than to like sit there and be like, who am I as a human and what is my purpose and what art do I want to make? This is for you. We are going to talk about how you can start embracing and embodying being a multi-hyphenate in your life and how you don't have to be your career. We are going to kind of share strategies as to how you can start navigating your very deep-rooted beliefs that drive this association that usually stem from our upbringing where we were overly rewarded with praise and awards and like we're just seen for our accolades and how we could perform in the world and how much deconditioning has to happen. And we're just going to kind of tangibly talk through like, what are the things you should be asking yourself if you're questioning leaving a career? What are the questions you should ask yourself if you're feeling miserable? How are the ways you can start sitting with yourself and even like getting to know yourself and developing a relationship with yourself in the first place to where you can even have an awareness of, oh, shoot, my job is maybe not aligned, or maybe that's why I'm miserable. And we're going to talk about how to get to know yourself and discover your own talents so that you can make a pivot and actually can take a leap and make a change and kind of get yourself out of the rut that you've maybe been in of associating yourself with one thing or one career path. So it was a cool topic. It's something we've never talked about on What's the Juice before. And it totally like took on a life of its own. I don't think I used any of the conversational questions I prepared, and we just riffed. And it was one of those episodes that was just from the soul. And that's really where I want to take What's the Juice. So this was good practice for me, even getting out of my rut of identifying myself with one thing, being this like health and wellness creator, because this is a totally different genre of podcast for me. So I hope you guys love it. I hope it's valuable. I would love to hear your thoughts. Leave me a comment on Instagram on one of the reels that I post with a clip from this episode, because you guys know I am the clip genie. I somehow pull them out and love to post them on Instagram now. I would just love to hear if you like this direction of topics. I love you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this journey. And I'll see you next week. Okay. Are you ready?
We feel each other's emotions.
It's everything. It's living my life intentionally.
That's the message, right?
Absolutely. There's no difference between our mental health and our physical health. It's the same exact thing.
And without further ado, let's get juicy. Welcome to What's the Juice, Madison.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to chat with you because
Likewise.
This season I told my audience that my goal is to connect them with a lot of practitioners. I want to put practitioners in front of folks that can work with them one-on-one, create a relationship, really get them to the next level of their health. However, when I look at the roadblocks in people's health, there's this really big piece of our work and what we do for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone is in a job or a career that they hate, that's draining the life out of them, that's causing them stress, no amount of work with a practitioner or herbs or diet changes are going to help them. So this is where your work is so beautiful and so valuable, and the message that you have to share with us.
Yeah.
And so I'd love for you to just kind of take us on this journey where you had to kind of claw yourself out of the hole of being in jobs that stressed you to the core, and also this way that you got out of associating your worth and your identity with your career and your productivity.
Yeah. First of all, great questions. And I'm fully with you. And I think that that's actually like should be the next chapter in how we're looking at our health, is how is our work impacting our health? I talk about it all the time, which is also why I'm here. So love it. In terms of the journey, it's ongoing. I always say that because I think that you get this, right? When you're in a position of people looking to you for advice, that there's this assumption that like we have it all figured out, that like finite, I figured it out. I no longer connect my work and my identity. And that's bullshit. It's an ongoing journey, right? So journey is the perfect way to describe it, because like I feel like it's a lifelong experience, actually, especially as somebody who still always wants to work and have my career and do things that make a living for me that I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
But in simple terms, I started my career in corporate America at places that were great for so many reasons, and also very, I don't want to say triggering, but a bit triggering for me, but in the best way.
Yeah.
So corporate America taught me that, it's important to have structure in your life. It's important to feel connected to waking up every single day and going to your job. But it's also okay if working within these constructs of a 9-to-5 don't work for you, and that we need to like self-interrogate why. So many years working corporate America, and really found myself in a place of like, wait, why do we work like this? Why am I working 9-to-5? Why am I getting up every day and going to the office? Is this bringing me joy? Made a hard pivot in the opposite direction. It was like, I'm going to go down the startup path, like be in a place that has no structure and is the wild, wild west. And like, it's just everyone on their own figuring it out, and learn the hard way there too. We're like, oh, that's actually not the answer either. That comes with a whole other share of problems. And then it led me to where I am now, which is being an entrepreneur and actually trying to implement things that I've learned in corporate America and things that I learned in the startup world to create an environment now for myself and my team that is really surrounded around work being a place where you can be yourself and also not be codependent on your job.
Codependent on your job. That just lit me up when you said that, because I've been talking so much about codependency this season and the difference between relying on other people, on substances, on, identity and worth and productivity, and being in right relationship with the things in our lives and the people in our lives. So tell us what that can look like when you have this codependency with your job.
Sure. I think it's completely a part of the system. The reality is that we are born, especially within the US, in a capitalistic consumerist country, right? Where you are told that you need to have a job. And you do need to have a job.
You sure do.
Right? Like,
bills are
very
piling
few
up.
people don't need to necessarily have a job. But then you're not taught until you're in the thick of that job that you need to have other things. So you spend your whole life, you go to high school, college, going for the job, and no one tells you about work-life balance until you're already well into that job and you're burnt out. And then people are like, oh, practice self-care. The system is designed for you to be codependent on the business, right? You're supposed to have a job to pay your bills, and all of a sudden it becomes how you exist in the world. But we don't teach people until they're well into the thick of it that like actually mentally you always need to be separate from your job. Your mental health and your job should never be one thing. And that having a separate identity from your job is really, in my opinion, the only way you can maintain a job in a healthy way.
Ooh.
If you don't separate those two things, and your identity becomes intertwined in your job.
Yeah.
And ultimately these systems are not really designed with individual identities in mind.
Yeah.
It's a hard reality. And I don't want to, sound too woo-woo, but the reality is that like these corporate structures, even startup structures, like they don't really care about us as a sole individual. And so it's on us. It's our responsibility to make sure that we know what that means for ourselves. And it happens too late and too often for people. They're way too into the weeds before they realize like, who am I outside of my career?
Really profound. When you said that it's actually healthy to be totally separate from our jobs, that is so the antithesis of how we function today, and even how much of a chunk of our day is spent thinking about working, checking notifications, having constant Slack, this, that come up on our phone that we're supposed to be almost nervous system attuned to.
Sure, 100%.
The way that one would be attuned to a child or something that needs them, right? It's totally, we almost have to fight tooth and nail to stay separate from our job. So what can that look like?
Well, I think the first step is just like understanding what enmeshment is. And I think that, just for those who don't know, enmeshment is the idea that like your job and your identity are one. And I think that there are some jobs that are more conducive to feeling that way than others. People feel as a doctor very much interconnected. That's one identity. As a creative, I know a lot of us feel, I consider myself a creative, that like my job and my creative sensibility is one. In theory, that's a beautiful thing. But the reality is that if for whatever reason, something happens to me and I'm no longer able to be a creative, my physical able-bodied prevents me from seeing or prevents me from using my hands or anything that could happen, what is my identity? Yeah. I have to know who I am outside of my output.
Yeah.
And I think we spend so much time getting caught up in what's paying our bills and intertwining the identity of that job with who we are, that if we are ever to get to a place where we decide maybe we don't want that, or that's not making us happy, or like it's time for a change, we don't know how to make it because it feels like we have to completely shift our entire sense of self. So I really believe that we have to keep these two things separate. It doesn't mean you don't care about your job.
Yes.
Right? Like you can still deeply care about your job, but you need to be able to identify who are you outside of your job. And it's not just like hobbies, things that we use that drive me crazy, that like phrases that people say, like, what do you do for self-care? What are your hobbies? Most people don't fucking know. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because actually those things are not a part of your identity either.
Wow.
Playing tennis is not an identity.
Yeah.
The identity version of that would be like, you're somebody who really enjoys being active.
Yeah. Right.
You're somebody who enjoys being physically connected. You're somebody who enjoys the outdoors and how you feel when you're outside. Not tennis.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just really big on separating that from personal experience of having spent most of my career not separating it.
Yeah.
And having really extreme consequences as a product of that.
I think it's almost a new question, right? What would happen if we decide in 10 years we want to pivot from this career? And the reason I think it's new is because a lot of our parents, especially when you come from immigrant parents, didn't have the privilege of pivoting careers. It was like they had to be locked into something, and we're so blessed to have an income. And it's such a foreign idea to even just one generation above us. We have this beautiful opportunity living in the time that we do, where we have a lot more opportunity at our fingertips, largely because of the internet, right? That we can pivot into the many different areas of interest that we may have. And so we do need to think more than ever of not being codependent and too attached on the one thing that we're doing right now, because that may change and we're allowed to be multifaceted.
100%. The other reality is, just from an infrastructure perspective, a lot of the things that were in place in our parents' generation like do not exist for us now. Yeah. Pensions, right? You used to be able to work for an extended period of time and receive a wonderful pension. Being able to buy a house, right? All of a sudden, you're able to have a steady salary increase that will then afford you the opportunity to buy a home. That is not within our wheelhouse anymore. It's just not, right? Millennials and Gen Z are the first two generations that are probably not going to ever experience homeownership. So the idea of following a system that our parents followed when we don't actually have the same privileges they have really doesn't make any sense. Now, it doesn't mean don't commit to a job. We're also in a day and age where people are doing overemployment, which I find fascinating, which is people are taking 2 or 3 full-time jobs because they've reached a sensibility of like, oh, my company doesn't care about me, so I'm going to say, fuck it, I'm going to go work for 5 other people. That also tells me you don't have much self-worth, because you're doing the same thing in the opposite form.
Well, what would you say? Because I think when we start this conversation and we're talking about changing the 9-to-5 narrative and having a different way of being and working, I think of folks who I know who have to work 2, 3, 4 jobs to even make ends meet. Right. How does this kind of paradigm or conversation apply to those folks who it's out of financial necessity?
I think it doesn't apply to them. So I mean more so the person who's working at Instagram and TikTok. People who are taking 2 full-time tech jobs, making $300,000 a year versus $200,000 a year. Let's just say they have extra time on their hands and filling it with another job that could go to somebody else who really needs it for their own personal gain. Now, we're living in a day and age where it's expensive.
Yeah.
Life is expensive.
Yeah.
So to each their own. My question is, and what I would love for people to interrogate, are you taking that job and really to be able to buy yourself a home, support your family, or are you taking that job because you don't want that time to sit with yourself? And that's really the question I want us as a group of people to think about. The person who's to take 2 or 3 or 4 jobs to make ends meet. This is like, I'm not talking about them.
Yeah.
Because that's a problem of our system right now. That's really unfortunate. And people absolutely should not have to work that much just to be able to put food on the table.
No, it's insane.
I'm more so thinking about the contingency of people who have privilege, have opportunity, and have time, and then choose to fill that time with more work. Because they're the first people. I was one of those people who then are so burnt out, miserable, talking about their burnout, writing about their burnout, complaining about their burnout with no self-acknowledgement. And that's what I want to interrogate is like, why are we doing that?
Let's talk about that why. Because I think what you're hitting on here, this need to be hyper productive, this need to be as efficient and effective as possible and monetize and commodify as many parts of our talents and skills and hours in our day as possible. What do you think are the underlying factors that are driving us to do this?
I think some of it's just not our fault. I think we've lost I think our phones and our addiction to dopamine we've lost our ability to sit in idle time and not have anything to do. The moments in our lives until the past 10 years where on the subway, walking down the street, that is when we could daydream. There was no distractions and you're just, I remember like just thinking, when you're driving and you go somewhere that you go to often and you arrive and you're like, how the hell did I get here?
Yes. Oh, God.
You know what I mean?
Always
It's
a rude
terrifying.
awakening that
And
I'm
you're
not
like,
being present.
But that you used to be able to kind of navigate the world that way and daydream that way. But we don't do that. We don't allow that for ourselves anymore. And so I think we've gotten addicted to the filling of that time. And I think what has also resulted is that we are so uncomfortable with sitting in our own thoughts. Because every moment that we now have where we could sit in our own thoughts and think about everything from the world, from how we feel in this moment, has been filled by the looking at our phone, checking text, checking social media, checking our emails, looking at Slack. I mean, we have no space to think about how we actually feel. And so it's not our fault, right? It's where we've gone as a society. But I really believe that like we can't control what happens to us in life. We can't stop these things. The objective here is not to go out and protest big tech and say, get rid of Instagram. Like that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
The work is in what do we do with ourselves, knowing that these things exist and how do we face them? Yeah. How do we deal with it? How do we improve our lives despite all of this happening around us? Because it's possible.
What were the first steps that you took to learn how to be with yourself and sit in moments of silence again?
That's a great question. I would say the first step was the radical acceptance that I didn't know how to do that. That's where I was. Like my day up until 2018 was I would sleep literally with my phone next to my pillow. I was very single at that time, as you can imagine, if the pillow next to me was my phone. Would wake up, check my Slack, have a dopamine hit, anxiety, stress, check my email. Okay, got to get out of bed, roll out of bed, put my phone down, make a cup of coffee, wash my face, brush my teeth, walk the dog. I would go straight to a Soul Cycle or Barry's boot camp and then go to work. And I'd be at work all day, checking, doing all the things that we do at our desks. Take the subway home, meet a friend for dinner, have some wine, on the phone, Slack check, get back at night, Slack check, phone, email, sleep, same thing again. There was literally no time that I gave for myself except when I was on the treadmill at Barry's or on the Soul Cycle bike where someone's yelling at me, where I was sitting with myself at all. So that was the reality. That was step one. It was just like radical acceptance of like, I don't know how to do this. I don't even know what I think. I don't even really know how I feel about myself. I was so codependent on my therapist even at that time. And she would say to me, like, you really shouldn't be coming this often. She was like, you need to learn how to process this stuff on your own. And I was like, I don't know how to fucking do that. That's why I'm here all the time, therapist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, literally.
I'm on your
That's why
couch.
I'm here. And she was like, that's the problem we're all living with right now, is that we need to learn how to go through some of this on our own.
What was her advice for that?
She started by saying, just close your eyes for 5 minutes every day and just let yourself think. Even if you're thinking about work the whole time, just give it to yourself. And I started that way. I started with just the self-reflection, 5 minutes every day. I ended up then taking a meditation course, learning how to meditate. That became part of my practice. And then I did the artist's way. Joined a group. And then all of a sudden I had like journaling and meditation as the two things which I now start my day with without fail, never any exceptions. And it's radically changed who I am as a person. But I had to also decide and be willing to learn how to sit with myself. Yeah. And that's what I really want for people, is that I think we believe that if we sit with ourselves, bad things are going to come up that we don't want to have to think about.
Or don't want to have to feel. I think it's more than thinking about how we feel. It's feeling how we feel.
But the only way out is through. Yeah. Right? You're not going to, those thoughts don't disappear. They just manifest in other ways. And you can work, 80-hour weeks and drink it away, but it's never actually going anywhere until you do that work.
If I may offer something that helped me when I started to be with myself, I sometimes I feel like the only time I was comfortable alone was like at night before I went to bed, because it was just me in bed, kind of like, I almost felt like I felt as a child, because when I was a little kid, I would talk to myself a lot before bed or like sing in my bed. It was like my little time. And so I started to just kind of like rub myself on my chest and be like, hi, I'm here with you. How you doing? Let's go over our day. What did we do today? Almost like you'd ask a child about their day.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And I would be like, let's walk through the day. What did we do? Okay, so we woke up, we did this. We had such a beautiful moment with the dog. That was so funny that he did this thing. And then we FaceTimed our friend at lunch, and that was so nice that time. And then we got that thing done, and it felt really good to be productive. And like, I would just kind of talk to myself through my day. And even just that's not a meditation. Yeah. But it's like starting to cultivate a relationship with yourself.
100%. Elizabeth Gilbert's version of that is to write love letters to yourself, which is also a really deeply emotional and beautiful way to self-reflect and just say, like, I think she calls herself lovely. And just a letter about your day that's written lovingly, as if you were writing it to someone you love, but it's to you.
So much of the answer is just treating yourself like someone you love and learning to treat yourself like a friend and spend time with yourself like a friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we wouldn't sit there next to a friend and scroll on our phones and ignore them.
Absolutely not. And if our friend was going through a tough time, we would sit with them in full attentive energy and make sure that we were with them until they start to feel a little bit better. Yeah. But yet we don't provide that for ourselves.
I want to take it back a bit to what you were talking about in the beginning regarding our actual jobs and our lived experience of the Slack messages while we're at dinner with a friend. Yeah. And also the identity codependency that comes with our work when we are very passionate about what we do. Because I know the women listening to this show are extremely passionate, and a lot of them love their jobs. Yeah. It just gets to be a lot. So what is some advice that you would have for someone who loves their job, loves their career, identifies with it because maybe they're creative and that can go a little bit deeper, but also wants to get away from that and embrace their full spectrum? I've heard you talk before about being a multihyphenate. Can you explain a bit about what that means and why it's powerful to identify as such?
Yeah. Well, one, I really believe that being a multi-hyphenate, we're all multi-hyphenates. We just don't feel that we can confidently own all the many things that we are.
And what is that? Like a multi-hyphenate, if you had to define it.
Yeah, I consider a multi-hyphenate as somebody who has a multitude of interests and passions that they pursue wholeheartedly. So I don't just pursue one thing that I do more than others. I am somebody who's like fully connected to being a writer as much as I am a founder of a business. I also think that women or female identifying folk don't feel as empowered to be multi-hyphenate because the world tells us we have to be a mom or a career woman, or you have to make these choices in your life that are so one thing that I find that most male identifying folk don't feel that they have to decide between being a dad or a career person.
100%.
And so I think it's harder for us to grasp being a multi-hyphenate because of the infrastructure, the way that the world has told us we can really only be one thing. So one, I find it to be incredibly freeing to be like, I am many things as a woman. I am a writer and a sister and a fiance and a CEO. And it's so freeing to be able to say that, because I also feel like I'm breaking this societal construct of what I can be as a woman. Yeah. So I recommend and encourage all female identifying folk to be identified as being multi-hyphenate, because I do think it challenges that expectation. I would say that, you know, for those of us that have many passions and want to do many things, I do believe that like things ebb and flow, and there's certain periods of our lives where hierarchically, you know, right now I'm more of a CEO than I am a writer, but in 5 years that might shift.
Yes.
And giving ourselves permission to be all those things, and also accept that they will ebb and flow in terms of priority.
Yes.
So hierarchy is maybe not the best word, but priority can be the word we can use as to like what we're focusing on. And so you can be all the things that you want to be. What if we shifted the thinking of like, what am I right now versus infinite?
They can also shift in hierarchy week to week and even day to day. And a powerful question is, what does my life need from me today? Who does my life need me to be today? Because I think we can be multi-hyphenates. We are multi-hyphenates, but we also can't be all of those things every day. One day you're going to be a really shit wife, but you're going to be an awesome CEO.
Yeah, totally.
The next day you're going to be an amazing girlfriend to your friend who just broke up with her boyfriend and needs you to cancel your workday so that she can cry on your shoulder. And then the day after that, you're going to be really good at your podcast. It's like,
yeah,
it's really being willing to lean in to the ebb and flow of what's calling you on that day and just giving that your all.
100%. 100%. There's two ways to also think about this that's similar. Brene Brown talks about it in the lens of relationship, which I love, which is she and her husband every single day say what percentage they have of themselves. And they look at themselves as a couple as 100%. And they wake up and say, I'm 20% of myself today. And her partner will say, okay, I got that 80%. Or he'll wake up and he's like, I'm 70% today. And she's like, okay, good. Then I'm going to let you lead. I'll be 30%. And I think we can actually do that for ourselves in our projects. We can decide like, you know what, my heart right now is like 70% into the writer side of me. So I'm going to give it that. It doesn't mean that what do you mean? There's 30% of me that's just, no, it's just right now that percentage is a little bit lower. And giving ourselves that opportunity, right, to shift those percentages day by day, hour by hour. I have a bunch of film, TV projects that I'm constantly working on. And I was at dinner with a friend and he was like, well, which one do you want to do? And I thought that was such an interesting question. Like he was asking me, or basically insinuating like, I would have to choose.
No.
And I was like, I think the question is, which one do I want to do first? And he was like, okay, fair. And so what if we gave ourselves that permission with everything? Let's just say you want to be a singer and you also want to be a lawyer. Like, okay, what if you gave yourself permission to say, okay, I'm going to do one of these first? Doesn't mean I'm not going to do the other one.
Yeah.
Just give yourself permission. I'll be a lawyer first. Or you know what? I'm going to self-fund that album first. And then I'll go to law school. Cool. Amazing. You've decided, you've put out to the universe that you can do both and you want to do both.
Yeah. Wow. I think the magic of identifying as a multi-hyphenate is that you are all those things and you are also nothing.
Exactly. And that it can change because you're still keeping it broad when you say multi-hyphenate.
Yeah.
You know, that no one, unless someone interrogates, no one needs to know what all those hyphenates are. That's up to you.
So you can actually just, like when someone asks you, what do you just say, I'm a multi-hyphenate?
All the time.
Sick.
And it's varied. Like there were years where I was like, that meant storyteller and strategist. Now it means writer and CEO. Ooh. And like what it'll mean in a couple years when I'm a mom, right? Like it'll have wife and mom in there. And still have career and all the other 900 things I want to be doing. And I am doing at all times. And so I just want women to feel that they have the permission to be all the things in the same way that men can be all the things without asking for permission for it. Yeah. No one says to like the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, like, how do you manage being a dad? No one. You know what I mean? Like, has anyone ever asked Elon Musk how he manages that he has 8 children?
Doesn't he have mad kids? Yeah, I was going to say.
No. One person has ever asked that question to him. How does he do it? How does he father 8 kids? No one gives a shit. But for women, it's always like, how do you do it?
You know, I was talking to my friend about this last night because we are very into like the the yin and yang dynamics within everyone, the masculine and feminine qualities that we all hold, regardless of how one identifies, right? There's this balance within us of the receiving versus the giving, the leadership and the pressing forward versus the slowing down and recuperating. And she and I talk specifically a lot about the masculine and feminine balance in relationships and how we're showing up with our partners, because we are such intense, driven,
I feel you. Yeah.
strong women. And she just became a mom. And she said that while she always expected her husband or her man to lead and be that like masculine leader in their relationship, she's finding that it's actually quite natural for a woman to lead, especially within the role of a family, being a mother, because the child responds to you and is so synced with you so intricately, because their nervous system is like attuned to mom. There's that special relationship. So why society is asking women, how do you balance being a mom and a CEO? I think it's because that mom position is so important. We are being asked to step into this wild leadership role that men don't even have the privilege of stepping into because of how our children attune to us. So I get the basis of the question, but the way in which it's asked is often condescending.
So condescending. Yeah. And I always say this, like, men are also impacted by the patriarchy, right? Like it gives no permission also for the guy to also be the one who like wants to have the more softer role and not have to be the breadwinner and like have the ability to be at home. Like, let's normalize that too and not emasculate him because he's making that decision. Like, it's not fair to anybody when we ask these types of questions and put these constructs in place, because it gives no permission for either anyone, no matter what you identify as gender-wise, to have a different position in society. And that to me is total bullshit. We should be able entirely as individual people to decide what that looks like for ourselves without any construct.
The world is changing. There are more female entrepreneurs than ever. And so if that's where you're being called to stand in your life and what you're being called to step into, and your man is like, you know what, I actually love being a father. I love taking care of the kids. That is, you need to go where the energy is calling you.
Yeah, 100%.
And so I think you're so right. This impact of the way that we've done things for so long, and the way that the patriarchy was sort of born out of women at one point having to evolutionarily rely on their man to protect them physically when we lived in these smaller, closed community systems and more in nature and danger. It's like, it's a new world, just like it's a new world for us in our careers versus our parents' lives, just like it's a new world for us financially, where buying a house isn't accessible. We got to like get to where we are right now.
Yeah. And release the expectation of like what role anyone is expected to have and what those roles look like.
Yeah.
Ezra Klein has an amazing podcast right now around the role of the family and what does it mean for us to raise families as communities, and what does it mean for us to completely change the constructs of gender and who gets to do what in a household and give permission for families to exist in whatever way that they want. And I love that as an idea. I mean, I desire to raise my children, my future children, in a community type environment.
Yeah.
I think it's really hard, especially as someone who's career oriented, to think that like my children won't have the opportunity to learn from somebody else. Like, that's absolutely not possible. Of course, I want my friends to share their wisdom. Why does it? I don't know all the answers.
Yeah.
You know, this idea that like we have this insular family. What? Why is that the better way to raise children?
Not just insular family, but I think of it in terms of insular school systems and communities in terms of how we're even schooling. One time my husband had brought up to me how most of the time when we're in school, we're only exposed to children of the exact same age.
That's so interesting.
Because we're in classes.
Right. And these like pods.
Yeah. We're in the third grade. So we're around third graders all day. But back when school was more, community focused, let's say back in the day when there was like a neighborhood schoolhouse, right? This is like taking it real back. But there was children of all different ages being taught by the teacher in the same environment. They were playing all together at recess or whatever it was. And they were, seeing a sixth grader model for them what it looked like to be kind to the second grader and help them tie their shoes. It's so important that we have that diversity of age, of culture, of everything.
It's such a good point. It's also like, it just exists as you get older. right? You experience people of all ages and you learn from them and you're guided by them.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't we start that earlier?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. Like my friends always joke. I have like a lot of friends who are like 55 years old.
Oh my God. I love my older friends.
Me too. Love.
The best.
Obsessed. Like truly, there's nobody else I want to spend time with.
I know.
You know, like,
No, I'm like, I'm not going to the club tonight. I'm going to go with Marianne.
Totally. My friend Maria, I went to her. She's 67. Went to have dinner with her. And I go to her house in LA and her daughter walks in and her daughter and I are the same age. And we both just start cracking up because like I'm hanging out with her mom.
Yeah.
But I just find that the wisdom of people who've lived before me is something I just constantly want to learn from.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you get to the point where you started making older friends? How did you do that?
It's so funny. I've always been like 95 at heart.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like always have had an
I'm going to
older
bed.
soul. Yeah, literally. My friends have called me Gandalf for years. Like, just like my dad always jokes that like at 11, I was like, I got this. And he was like, you're okay. Well, when I was a child, my parents, we were always around adults and they would have dinner parties all the time. And there was no kids table. The kids sat with the adults and there were no distractions allowed. You weren't allowed to like play with toys or be on your Game Boy. It was like you needed to engage and you needed to have conversations with the adults at the table, and the adults at the table needed to have conversations that were appropriate for children to be able to understand. And I will do that with my own children because it was so influential to me to have that exposure, to be taken that seriously, even as a child, to feel like people were listening to me and to be able to learn, and also to be bored. Like I spent so many of those dinners but I think it taught me how to tap into my own creativity and how to dream. Because obviously by nature, eventually the conversation is going to go over the 11-year-old's head.
But it helps to give you some culture. It helps to give you this intellectual, plant these seeds where you can eventually understand those topics later because you heard them and were primed.
100%. When I see children now with their iPads at the dinner table, I want to just be like, let them be bored. Because when you can tap into boredom, it leads to imagination, right? Like even when we're bored now as adults, eventually, okay, let's say you first go through the anxiety and then you go through the to-do list and then you go to the obligations. And then eventually you get to like just full fantasy, full dream, full imagination. You know, when you're on a plane and the Wi-Fi isn't working, the screens are not broken. Some people are having, conniptions, and you just end up staring out the window. And all of a sudden you're like daydreaming about a book you want to write or a trip you want to take. Like that is amazing time. And I think I'm able to do that pretty quickly as an adult now, is because as a child, I was given so much permission to do that, frankly, required to do it. Because once they started talking about politics, I was like, I don't know what the heck is happening here. And so daydreaming.
I mean, that's just so cool that you were even at dinner tables with your family where they did talk about politics. And you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, I am such a career woman. I've done a lot and want to keep doing a lot, but I'm kind of thinking maybe the answer is I need to have a lot of kids. Because I think about my husband's family. My husband's Puerto Rican and has a huge family. And I feel like Hispanic families tend to have a lot more kids. Yeah. And there's like all these different generations mingling at once. And like, his sister's like an aunt to a nephew that's like just a year under her age. And then her other nephew's one.
Right.
So it's like they mingle ages and families because everyone has so many kids. And it's more of this like community driven culture where everyone helps each other out, which is why they can have so many kids. Sure. And so I think about our family gatherings with his side versus my side. And there's just so many humans, all the elders, the next generation, his parents' generation, like there's like these middle generations even. And you get so much exposure to different conversations and you have to learn how to hold yourself and behave talking to different ages of people. Mm-hmm. And it's really valuable. Maybe we just need to have a whole bunch of babies.
100%. I mean, look, I think you can learn as from a child as much as you can from someone who's an elder.
Yeah.
Children have such an amazing way of seeing the world and experiencing the world. One of my best friends has a 5-year-old daughter, Viva, who I think is the wisest person I know. She just tells it how it is. What I love about kids is like, they don't want to do something, they don't do it.
Oh, yeah.
as an adult, we get older and someone's like, do you want to like go do this? It takes years to get to the point where we're like, no. We spent a lot of years being like, yeah, sure. And then you're miserable, right? Kids don't do it, you know? And they also, what I love about children is they don't let you, like, I feel like every time I see a child drawing something, and if I'm like, is that a dog? They're like, no, it's a hippopotamus like jumping over a rail into a garden. And you're like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, you're like, yes, if that's what that is to you, I believe you. And that disappears for some reason as we get older, our trust in other people in that capacity. But kids let you know, like, no, this is what this is for me. And we all just say, okay, I respect that. I'm not going to fight a 5-year-old and say, that's a dog. If she wants to say it's a hippopotamus jumping over a rail, great. I fully accept that. I love it. It's beautiful. Thank you for drawing that, Viva.
That is exactly why, like I was telling you before, I am going to be devoting myself to inner child work because I really think we need to like pull out the photos of us as kids, the videos, remember who that kid was before the rest of the world told us to be quiet or be different or do whatever, and reconnect with them and be like, who are you?
Yeah.
Because I think we've gone so far from who we really are and what we really think about things. And children's answers are honest.
100%.
And we've lost honesty at the sake of people pleasing.
I think the disconnection from who we are and like in our basis of understanding our identity is what leads to burnout, is what leads to so many physical and mental health issues, is the loss of a sense of self. And that sense of self, I think, fades as we get older because it's disconnected from our inner child. I strongly believe that.
What are some questions that you asked yourself when you started to dive into who am I and what do I actually want to do in this world other than this job that's burning me out?
Wow. Love that question. I started asking myself, who am I doing this for? Because I started to really realize that, was I doing this for myself or was I doing this for other people? And I realized I was navigating most of my life for other people. Now, not in an explicit way. I've never had someone breathing down my neck telling me I have to be this one thing. I actually have parents who all they cared about was that like I was quote unquote successful, but whatever that meant didn't matter. If I wanted to become like the best gymnast in the world, like go for it, right? But I had to pursue something wholeheartedly.
Okay.
That has its own list of problems, right? Yeah. That we can have a separate podcast about that. But I started to realize it was really for a lot of other people and not for myself. And I talk about this a lot. Like I joke that, you know, Forbes doesn't invite me to things probably because I talk about this so much. But I was really, I was like really pursuing 30 under 30 for the wrong reasons. I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it for like proving other people.
The eyes of others.
Yeah.
It's what so many of our decisions are now based on, especially in such a seen culture.
100%. So like that was the biggest question is like, I just, who was I doing all of this for? Who was I exhausting myself for? Who was I depriving my creativity for? Who was I sacrificing my free time, my quality? Like, who was it for? And it became so clear it was not for me.
Yeah. Who was it for? What was the answer that you came to?
A lot of it was like a group of invisible people, which really became like a strong catalyst. Like, well, you don't even know who this is for. Now that's a scary feeling of you're like, I know this is not for me, but I don't really know.
I can't even
name these
people.
It's not my parents. It's not my boss. At that point, I was working for myself. So is it really like my second grade teacher that not really like, I don't even remember my second grade teacher's name, you know? So it was for this idea, this narrative, and not every, but there's a lot of speeches when people win things and they say, this goes out to everybody who told me I wasn't going to be this and that. How many people are actually told that? I'm sorry. I just don't believe most people are told that.
I don't know. Haters are always lurking.
Haters are lurking, but I don't know how much a hater is actually reaching out to people and be like, you're not good for nothing. You know what I mean? Like, maybe we feel that. Maybe we're like, I can feel that person. But so few people are actually told face to face, someone saying, you're not good for anything.
Yeah.
So why I say that is because I actually believe I made up in my head who these people were that I was needing to prove.
That's such a good point.
I think I was adopting that energy that we hear so often in the acceptance speech of that person be like, this goes out to all the haters and all the people. I don't really have haters.
Yeah, it's this existential question of when you have enough to live and get your basic needs met and go out to dinner with your friends and take some vacations and you're good, who are you then fighting against?
Exactly.
To have more,
to have
and prove
more.
yourself.
And I think we built this idea that there's a group of haters. Some people have them. Let's be real. Some people have them. I, at that time in my life, did not have like an army of haters out there being like Madison. No, like if I'm being honest with myself, like that just didn't exist. It was just not there. They were not there. Those haters were not there. Of course. Do I think there are people in my life who were jealous? Do I think there are people in my life? Of course, that's just human nature. I think we are naturally as human beings like competitive and jealous, but I wasn't actively being told these things. It was a construct that I was adopting by what I saw other successful people saying was their reason for pursuing their careers and their success. And when I came to realize that like, that was actually not my experience, that who was driving it wasn't there, then I was like, this gimmick is up, Madison.
Ooh.
Like, that's enough, Madison.
So do you think you were ultimately overworking yourself, burning yourself out, engaging in hustle culture in order to prove to yourself that you were
was the hater?
Okay.
I was the hater. That was the work of being like, you are the one.
Yeah.
That's telling yourself these things. There's literally nobody telling you this. Nobody. And that awareness that could shift, that I could also be the person to practice loving kindness, that was within my choice too, that I had that capacity to make that pivot, freeing. And that's how I speak to myself now.
I think it goes back to what you said a few beats earlier, which is that you need to know who you are. Yeah. And yes, we're talking about who you are might be that identity of the multihyphenate, or who you are might be the realization that I'm none of those things and I am just a human. And when I go into nature, I really like looking at a flower. You know, it's like it's breaking it down to just that core level. But I think that this battle against ourselves of I need to prove myself, the line that comes after that is because I don't feel worthy. Yeah. And the line that comes after that is I don't feel worthy, nor do I have self-esteem because I don't have a self-relationship.
Exactly.
I don't know who I am.
Exactly. Because there was no internal compass.
Yeah.
Right. It was just all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Exactly right. Yeah.
So what are some of the top things? I always want to give the tangibles to the listener, right? What are some of the top things that you did to finally build that relationship with yourself and come to the point where you know who you are now?
Yeah. I had a friend who told me that so much about self-belief is about reps. That if you say something to yourself enough times, just like if you do it in the negative, you say the same amount that you would say to yourself in the negative, which is what most people do. I'm this, I'm that. You shift it and have that amount of things that you say to yourself and the reps be positive, eventually you will start to believe it. So true. I bought affirmation beads. It was a strand of 100 beads. And I would just go through my new affirmations, reps, confident, secure, present, grateful, just over and over and over. I'd walk around with them. I would just started to say, anytime I had a negative thought about myself, switch it with a positive thought. Flip it. I mean, like constantly, I'd Post-its all over my apartment. Just started, when he said it was about reps, I was like, oh, that's a tangible thing I can do. I can put in new reps. I can start speaking to myself positively and really put in the time. And he's right. It works. I feel that way about myself now. Of course, it takes years, right? Whereas this 2018, it's 2024. It's taken me years, but I do not talk to myself in that way like I used to at all. Not even close.
Why do you think talking to yourself differently and more compassionately is so important in finding out who you are? Do you think that it's because it helps you to build that trust of, oh, she's not going to be mean to me anymore. I can start to blossom and show her as in myself, who I am?
It puts the onus on yourself instead of other people. The imaginary haters or whatever else we all have, like it's when you realize it's you, you're like, oh no, this is my responsibility. I am solely responsible for my well-being. Truly. Sure. I think until you are an adult I believe a choice. If you are a parent, you are responsible for the well-being of your child. That is a non-negotiable for me. Telling a 13-year-old, like not at all. Once you become an adult, and I actually consider adulthood after college, you are not an adult, even though you are legally, like I was a lost teenager still at 19 years old, like just with a little bit more freedom and responsibility. When you become an adult, truly an adult, and you're on your own and you're working and you have your own apartment, it is your responsibility. And it's empowering to fully accept that and stop blaming the world, because the world is not responsible for you. You're responsible for you. And again, like you can't help what happens to you in life, but you can 100% help how you deal with your life. And that personal responsibility to me is super empowering. It's also how you shift the my boss this, my boss that, to this job isn't right for me. You know what I mean?
Are you in the drama of my boss is this, and then this person did this, and this is so annoying, and my workload was crazy? Or are you in the solution of this might not be a fit?
Yeah, your boss doesn't have to do shit. That's the reality, right? Yeah. It's like, I've talked about this before, but I was working in a job that I hated. And I was so gung-ho about changing this place. I was like leading a revolution internally about we're going to change the company structure. And the people who own this company, they did not want to change this company. And my mom, who has a very abrasive, tough disposition. She's a Wall Street banker, like grew up in Germany, like, you don't want to fuck with Phyllis. She's a no mess with this kind of lady. She said to me, you know what, Madison, one day you're going to have to accept that they don't have to change if they don't want to. And I was like, Mom, I am out here trying to flip the script and change. And she was like, guess what? They don't have to change this company if they don't want to change the company. You have to decide if you want to work there. And I was so upset. I remember being so mad at her. I thought she was invalidating my experience and my feelings. And in some ways she was, but in some ways, like she was 100% right.
Yeah.
That company also worked for a lot of people. Not everyone was as unhappy as I was.
Yeah.
It didn't work for me. That lifestyle did not work for me. That grind did not work for me. But like, was every single person there unhappy? No way. They wouldn't have been able to exist. And so I had to pivot and shift, like, okay, I'm going to stop complaining about my boss and I'm going to go find a new job. And that's the shift from blaming everyone else to taking responsibility.
That is the shift from codependency to ownership and interdependency and individuality.
100%. I mean, I get messages all the time from people across all gender identifications, literally around the world. And it's usually my boss this. Yeah. Now, the ability to change your job comes from a place of privilege. But there are a lot of people in places of privileges that are not changing their jobs. If you even can think about applying for another job, you have privilege. And so it's really on you for not changing that.
Yeah.
Because there are millions of people who would do anything in a second, would trade spots with you in your awful, bad boss job. Mm-hmm. Literally millions, maybe billions of people who would, no matter how bad we think, any of us, even just sitting in this room, we think our boss or our job is bad. 1 billion people would switch spots like this to get out of their life.
No.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And so if you have the agency to even contemplate switching your job,
yes,
and you choose not to,
as business owners, I think we can also speak to how, not easy, I'm not going to say it's easy, but how valuable it is for those listening who know that they can apply for a different job or can change a job to just shoot their shot.
Go for it.
I've hired everyone in my company from someone who DM'd or emailed me.
100%.
Just shoot your shot. Tell me why I need you. Tell me the cool ideas that you have. Send me your work. 9 times out of 10, I need you.
And also, you've got nothing to lose, because if you don't get the job, you just gained a learning experience and then one more rep.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there is no loss in that. People are like, well, if I don't get the job, then like, I'm like, no, you just learned how to do that. It's the same thing with dating. Like, my sister is just, I'm like, one day she needs to become a dating coach. She's in a relationship now, but how she looked at dating was like, every bad date was a learning experience for what type of person she didn't want to be with.
Wow.
So then it was never actually a bad date, because it always just was an opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
And so shoot your shot 100%. Send the resume, apply for the job.
Yeah.
Like, you got nothing to lose.
I like how you've so beautifully brought it back to leaving, like the actual action step of if you're really unhappy listening to this right now, and you've asked yourself the questions that you've kind of outlined here of who am I doing this for?
Yeah.
Am I doing this for some abstract goal? Am I good? Do I really
Invisible
have everything I need? Yeah. Am I doing it for the invisible haters? Do I really not need to prove myself here? And thus I can find something that's a better fit. If they're at that level, I want to do some quick fire where I'm going to ask you, well, first, what are the top 3 things our listeners should do if they're questioning leaving their career?
Mm-hmm. I put a date on the calendar with your friends on that Google Calendar invite that either says it's your resignation or your commitment to stay. Make a decision and have peer accountability for it. Because listen, just like relationships, I'm always like, be careful about complaining about your boyfriend because you might just be going through a bad spell. Mm-hmm. Jobs can have that way too. Sometimes you're just like having a tough quarter or a tough year at your job. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad job or that like you have to quit. So like be accountable to that. Like it's also okay if you decide to stay, but like make a date where you're going to stop complaining about it. You're either going to stay or you're going to quit. Yeah. And so that's like the first step, I would say. Make a decision, Google invite, have your closest people on it and be prepared. It could be a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months. Be prepared to make that decision. Write a letter to yourself, I think is also a beautiful, valuable thing to do. Write a love letter to yourself about how you're feeling and what you're aspiring towards and like put it away and prepare to look at it another time. But like truly like think about your aspirations and put that down.
And think about this leap that you're thinking of making, why behind the leap and what that leap would allow you to do in place of what you're doing now.
And the third one is one that is not my words, it's Brendan Burchard's, but when I first listened to him saying this, it literally like knocked me off my feet. He's like, people write their goals every year at the start of the new year and they don't ever go back to that first page in their notebook. I was like, oh, he's like, literally like people write their goals down and then they're like 6 months later, like I haven't done anything. He's like, well, when's the last time you actually looked at your goals? So put your top 3 goals on a Post-it and tape it to your mirror, your fridge, and look at that goals every day. I have my goals, my top 10 on my fridge. Every single day I look at it.
I love that.
Even if it's just a quick glance.
Yep. Have them somewhere where it's visible.
Have it visible. If your goal is quitting your job, moving on, make sure you can see that goal because it's just not natural that you're going to remember it every single day.
What are some maybe more specific questions that people could also ask themselves on a soul level when they're evaluating what they actually do want to do after they leave this job?
Yeah.
Because I listened to another show and you had asked this question of yourself because you work in social media marketing and et cetera, like the creative world. You said, is being on my phone because my job is on my phone something I want for myself? So what are some of those kinds of questions?
I love that. That's a great point. Some of the questions I would ask yourself to self-interrogate is like, actually not even people say, where do you want to be in 5 years? Like, I'm like, didn't COVID teach us like we can't? Like,
I actually have never made a single, even 1 year plan for my business.
Yeah, it's like, it's a ridiculous question.
Yeah. Well, how would I know what's going to happen in a year? I don't know.
Exactly. So I would say like, how do I want to feel in 6 months? Like just feeling 6 months from now, what do you want to feel like? How does that, what does that mean for the job that you're in to reach that feeling? If your goal is like at peace with free time and your job is having you work 70-hour weeks, then like,
or that's the nature of your job.
Yeah,
because I think this question you asked yourself was more about the nature
yes,
of your
100%
career path.
Yeah, and I would say that also like asking questions around, especially if you're working for a company, like, is the style of work within this company conducive to my happiness? Some people thrive with constant communication. Some people want to communicate via text. Some people love 3-hour meetings. If that doesn't work for you, but that's the way that that company operates, you have to ask yourself that question. Is the way that this company works, does that work for how I want to work? And I don't like having work conversations via text. I have clients, that's how they communicate.
I love it.
Yeah, see, God, people love it. People love it. So that's what I mean. Like, ask yourself, is that style of work conducive to my happiness? I'm actually somebody who's like, I want to do everything on email or Slack.
Yeah.
Because my brain with text gets lost. Things get lost. People were like, why don't you respond to your text messages? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I read them, I respond in my brain, and it doesn't go out.
Yeah. I'm like that with like a friend text or like a catch-up text. I'm like, oh God, there's so much I want to say. But with a quick work text, I'm like, Can we try this? Can we do this? Blah, blah, blah. What do you think about this?
The amount of times I respond, I'm like, oh my God, I responded in my head. Oh my God, I responded in my head.
Yeah.
Like that's how I don't text in my brain, like don't work for work.
Got it. So there's more of a process on your email.
I need a
Slack.
process. I need that type of organization. So is the style of how this company works conducive to how I want to work?
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's not about good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think people gets caught up in. Is like, is this good or is this bad? What about how it works for you or doesn't work for you? It's very different.
And even going back to the nature of like the industry, maybe is the nature of this industry a place where I feel I can make the most impact? Yes. If impact's what's most important to you. And even going further back a step, what is most important to me? Yes. Is it impact? Is it money? Is it free time?
How I got out of social media actually exclusively to brand strategy, which is where we're a brand strategy and design firm. So we don't do social at all. I closed that down.
Oh, wow.
Entirely. Yeah. Because when I asked myself that question, is being on my phone a part of the job I want to have? The answer was no.
So your agency doesn't serve social strategy at all. You just do branding.
Branding and design. We closed down social in 2022.
Wow.
Yeah.
So cool that you just said no to that.
Yeah. It was when I asked myself that question, it was like, no, I don't. I don't want my work to be exclusive to my phone. The next question I would ask, or what I started to interrogate for myself, was where are my skills transferable? So I knew I was an amazing storyteller. I won all these awards storytelling for brands via social. If storytelling is the skill, where else can I apply this? Brand strategy was like a very easy pivot. So ask yourself, like, where are your skills transferable? I have the lead copywriter on my team was an editorial fashion writer for years and was like, I want to get out of media. Her skills are transferable to brand copywriting.
And what are my skills and what do I have the most fun doing?
Yeah. Yeah. But most people think their skills are not transferable. It's a roadblock. They're like, I went to school for this, or the past 5 years, I've done that.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, there's skills behind the job. Yep. And all of those skills are transferable to another job.
Yep. I just got an email from a journalist last night who does political articles.
Oh gosh. I actually think journalism has some of the most highly transferable skills.
Yes.
Yeah.
You just got to research so that you can break down a complex topic into understandable
nuggets. Oh my gosh,
nuggets.
incredible.
Perfect for the health world.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Exactly. It's why so many journalists have also gone to television.
Yeah.
When I was at Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, John had hired like a lot of people on the team who came from New York Times and The Atlantic and New Yorker because there were such highly transferable skills. Storytelling can be applied to TV.
Yeah. Yeah. All of you listening out there, you have some amazing transferable skills. Just identify them.
Yes, exactly.
Beautiful. Okay. Last question I want to ask you is kind of different from this conversation, but related. What were some of the stark differences between the best bosses you ever had and the worst bosses you ever had?
Oh, great question.
And as a follow-up, what do you think are the most important qualities in a leader?
Oh, these are great. The most stark differences from the best and worst bosses were empathy. The best bosses I've ever had were deeply empathetic people. The worst bosses I've ever had were honestly like socially inept. Like empathy was like, whether it was a choice or how they just were as people, they could not empathize for other humans. And it made the human variables of emotions and life experiences, all the things that we bring to the workplace, they did not have consideration for. And it doesn't lead to good work. Human beings, we're variable people. We have life experiences that we have no control over that impact how we feel about ourselves and the world and how we can even get up. And if we don't have empathy, the fact that every single one of us has that happen across our lives at so many different points, I just don't think it leads to a healthy, conducive workplace. So empathy is undeniably the biggest contrast in the great bosses and poor bosses that I've had.
It's just kind of also sounds like narcissism. It's like seeing people as equal humans who have just as bad days as you do and aren't machines and don't have unlimited output. Yeah. And just not seeing them as under you, seeing everyone as equals.
I would also say the other one would be, and again, I can't say I confidently know this for a fact because I never really got into these types of conversations with them. But the intention behind why they were in that job in that field, I think greatly impacted how they were leading the business. So if they were in that business because, my boss at Refinery 29 was just an incredible person and she really believed in the mission of Refinery and really believed that women deserved the opportunity to have media that was made for them. versus somebody who's in it for the money or somebody who's in it for the power. It's a different kind of boss.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can feel the difference between the boss that's like rooted in the why behind the business and the one who's like, I don't give a fuck. I'm here to make money. They lead very differently.
Yeah. The leadership is, to me, defined by the former.
100%.
Yeah. By having a strong why, a strong purpose. That's beautiful. All right. Well, Madison.
Thank you we talked about so many different things.
We
I
did.
love it.
Oh my God. It's like, I was like, why is this such a vibe? And I'm like, Leo to Leo. Once you said Leo,
yes, totally.
I was like, it's over. So wow, you
Thank you for having me. This was great. This is so great.
lovely.
I also love that we also talked about like the mom thing too.
Yeah.
I think it's super important.
Yeah. Now we got to go have a bunch of kids.
I know. I'm like, God, I'm actually like so down.
Me too. You just got married too, right?
About to get married. That was my engagement
Oh,
party.
that was your engagement party. Oh my, well, I can't wait to see the freaking wedding.
We decided to do a big engagement party because we're having a small wedding.
Okay. What a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah, we're just
include
like
everybody. And
yeah, include everyone. Had it in New York.
moment.
We were like, just come one, come all. My dad had his fucking foot doctor there. Like he literally invited anyone,
Gorgeous.
like
Gorgeous.
anybody. And I'm like, great. Now I get to have like a 70-person wedding. He was like, Rock, he loves you. I'm like, honestly, whoever you
Rock
want.
the foot doctor.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I love Rock. We got to send
I don't even know if Rock came, but like he was invited.
Crying.
I know.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, we're all going to stay up to date and keep up with your wedding.
Yeah, thank you.
And please tell us where we can find you and about your agency.
I will. It's Madison Utendahl is my Instagram handle and my agency is Utendahl Creative.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me.